as the investigation team of the Jiangnan District won a great victory by defeating the Corpse King near the territory of Radiant Prosperity Base. They soon found out that their mission was far from over and just got a lot more complicated. Of course, this was the first time any person or team had seen or gotten close to a Corpse King for that matter, let alone killing it, which directly caused the zombies around Radiant Prosperity Base to lose their command and become wild beasts that only act according to instinct. Some zombies ran around the base in broad daylight aimlessly. At first, the soldiers of the base were confused and surprised to find that the combat effectiveness of the zombies was sharply reduced. They no longer avoided obvious traps and direct line of fire, and as long as no one antagonized or stand almost directly in front of them, they wouldn't react or rush over without thinking. Why do you feel like these zombies have become stupid? Xiao Honglian asked Zhuge Qingting, even though she clearly witnessed everything unfold. Xiao Honglian couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief at this new development. Then, she ordered her men to dispose of them, and under no circumstance were they allowed to let any survive. The soldiers quickly strapped themselves with flamethrowers and released an endless sea of flames on the unintelligent zombies. Upon seeing the soldiers holding flamethrowers, the army of undead didn't even know how to dodge, and were immediately burned to death in their large numbers. Although I don't know what happened, it's good news anyway, Xiao Honglian said with her arms folded. Her frown earlier also relaxed. Upon hearing this, Zhuge Qingting asked her with some doubts. Could this be related to the investigation team from Jiangnan District? Xiao Honglian thought of the members of the investigation team with terrible strength, and her expression was a little serious. This possibility cannot be ruled out, she said. There is a high probability that it may be related to them. Xiao Honglian and Zhuge Qingting's eyes were filled with some undisguised shock. Is this the strength of Jiangnan District? A team of only 7 people actually solved a big problem in a region on the first day they arrived in Tianhai City. And although this thoughts intimidated them, they were even more astonished by the might of the Jiangnan District. Meanwhile, at the headquarters of the Snow Worship Sect, their situation had not changed in any significant way, and the sect suffered another great loss. They experienced another fierce battle, and many believers died in this battle. The surrounding areas of the church had become a dilapidated scene, and the light of dawn did not bring anyone the beauty of a new day. There were broken corpses everywhere. Some of them were the sect members, and the rest were the zombies and the giant rats. These corpses needed to be cleaned up. Otherwise, they might become new zombies later on. The dead bodies had to be moved to the abandoned building behind the church to nourish the sacred tree. As a priest with a certain status in the Snow Worship Sect, Li Jian was well protected during the chaos. His family, however, wasn't. The battle was too fierce and he was separated from his family. Now he only found his wife, Zhang Jianfang, and the two of them were anxiously looking for their son, Li Kale. Where did that kid Kale go? There is chaos every day. Why doesn't he listen? Zhang Jianfang looked anxious. There were dead bodies everywhere, and she was afraid that her son was among them. Zhang Jianfang and her son could have hidden safely, but Li Kale was worried about his girlfriend and ran to find her despite her mother's objection. As a result, until now, they have not seen the shadow of Li Kale or his girlfriend, Su Beibei. The two could only shuttle around anxiously, calling their son's name. But when they both came to the corner of the ruins of a building, the scene in front of them made them feel like they were frozen, cold from head to toe. Under the shadow of the ruins, Li Kale was lying on the ground lifelessly, and his lower body was soaked with dark red blood. And beside his lying figure was the leader of the sect, Yuan Kongye. Yuan Kongye was kneeling beside Li Kale, holding a sharp dagger in her hand. She was staring at Li Kale's lifeless body expressionlessly, and Su Beibei was cowering in a distant corner. Li Jian's mind was blank, but the next moment, the instinct of fatherly love made him yell for his son. Lei! Li Jian immediately rushed towards the two. Yuan Kongye still looked down at Li Kale, with a hint of crazy in her demeanor. Without even turning her head, she stretched out her left hand towards the approaching Li Jian. Immediately, a golden shockwave burst out from her hand. Then, accompanied with a loud boom, Li Jian felt like he was hit by a truck. He flew backwards 4 or 5 meters and then fell heavily to the ground. Seeing her husband being thrown away like a rag doll, Zhang Jianfang's face turned extremely pale. She just stood there, motionless. The entire scene was too much for her to process. Yuan Kongye looked down at Li Kale and murmured, "So dirty, you need to be purified." Everything in front of them made Li Jian and his wife extremely desperate. They didn't understand why the holy leader wanted to attack their son. However, at this moment, the figure of the high priest Zhang Yi appeared there. He glanced at the scene and just frowned slightly. Then, he walked past Li Jian and his wife to Yuan Kongye's side. After seeing Yuan Kongya's twisted and struggling expression, he opened his wide cloak and hugged Yuan Kongya into his arms. Sect leader, he whispered, his tall and lean figure encasing Yuan Kongya in a tight embrace. Yuan Kongya's body was still stiff, but the frenzy in her eyes immediately started to dissipate little by little until she was back to her senses. Original sin is unforgivable. I'm helping him, she said slowly in a cold tone. I know. You didn't do anything wrong. You are always right, he replied. Zhang Yi let Yuan Kongya keep the bloody dagger she was holding and took her away. Li Jian and Zhang Jianfang could only watch them leave. At this moment, they were extremely angry and terrified, but they had no time to think about that. So they hurriedly rushed forward to check on their son's condition. When Li Jian got to his son, he soon found out that his son was sort of dead. Li Kale had a faint heartbeat in his unconscious state. His face was as pale as a ghost, and his lower body was covered in blood, but his upper body had no fatal injuries. Li Jian's face instantly became extremely ugly. He knew of the purification ceremony for joining the sect. It is said that many little boys who join the religion of the sect all go through this step. Before, he relied on his special abilities to serve the sect, and thought that his son could escape this disaster. But unexpectedly, this day still came. The couple were extremely sad, and the only good news was that they didn't lose their son forever. After Yuan Kongya finished with her ritual, she did not forget to use her ability to stop the bleeding. Li Jian's pressing concern was how his son would face the changes in his body when he wakes up. Anger, helplessness, despair, pity, and confusion. Li Jian was filled with all kinds of emotions at this moment. He couldn't figure out the real reason why Yuan Kongya would do this to his son. But at this moment, Zhang Jianfang saw a trembling figure not far away. Huddled up in the shadow of a corner was Li Kale's girlfriend, Su Beibei. She curled up into a ball with a look of fear on her face, hugging her knees tightly and shaking non-stop. Zhang Jianfang thought that her son came out to protect her. Knowing this, she gritted her teeth and shouted at her. Su Beibei, what the hell is going on? Haven't you been with Kale all this time? Why was my son treated like this by the sect leader? Is it because of you? Su Beibei was already crying and looked like she was having a mental breakdown. So, facing Zhang Jianfang's questioning, she shook her head repeatedly. I didn't do anything. She lowered her head with a look of grievance and confusion. We just kissed each other after we escaped from death. And then the leader found out. So Su Beibei thought of the scene just now and became extremely frightened. I don't know why she is like that, she continued. Su Beibei then proceeds to put her head in her hands and cried bitterly. Li Jian and Zhang Jianfang saw what happened to their son. In addition to anger, they were more desperate and puzzled. Yuan Kongya did this, and they have no way to even get justice or avenge their son. After all, they need the protection of the sect to survive in this icy apocalypse. What they failed to figure out was why Yuan Kongya was so against romantic affection between a boy and a girl. In fact, after joining the church and learning about the special initiation ceremony, Li Jian realized that Yuan Kongya was very wrong in her actions. Why would she castrate underage boys, but turn a blind eye to adult men? What is the reason? On the other side, Zhang Yi took Yuan Kongya back to her room behind the church. Yuan Kongya sat on her bed, hugging her knees tightly. There was a touch of weakness and confusion that had appeared on her face for the first time. She looked up and asked Zhang Yi, I didn't do anything wrong, right? That kind of thing is inherently wrong. I'm just helping them to take the right path. Zhang Yi half knelt in front of her. Then, looking up at Yuan Kongya, he replied with full conviction. You're not wrong. It's all the child's fault. In the end times, love doesn't need to exist, and impure relationships between men and women should be prohibited. Sighing softly, Yuan Kongya then said, They may not understand my painstaking efforts. As she spoke, she stretched out her white and tender palm to touch Zhang Yixin's face. It would be great if all men could be like you. Then, this world would no longer be so impure. Yuan Kongya's cold little hand made Zhang Yixin's face more gentle. This world will eventually be as you wish. Hearing this, Yuan Kongya took her hand back. Her face had regained the confidence and seriousness of her usual self. That child is Li Jian's son. He won't have any emotions, right? Zhang Yi smiled slightly and replied, I will go and talk to him and let him understand your painstaking efforts. I think he will understand. Yuan Kongya simply nodded and said nothing more. Currently, Li Jian's ability was very useful to them, so they still have to win him over. Meanwhile, inside the church, Li Kale was yelling like crazy. He even began to show signs of self-harm when he woke up. What's the point of living now? Zhang Jianfang could only try to comfort her son again and again. "Don't worry, we will work hard and live well together as a family of 3, she said. A while later, Li Jian, who had been depressed all day, welcomed the high priest, Zhang Yi. Seeing Zhang Yi, although Li Jian felt unhappy, he still forced himself to receive him. "Mr. Zhang," Li Jian said. Zhang Yi calmly closed the distance between them and gently grabbed hold of Li Jian's shoulder and questioned, "Didn't I tell you that you should address people by their titles when you are working?" Li Jian quickly changed his words and said, "Yes, His Excellency." The high priest, pleased with Li Jian's correction, Zhang Yi replied that Li Jian shouldn't mind. He had only been a member of the church for a short time, so it would take him a while to get used to some titles. Zhang Yi could see a hint of displeasure on Li Jian's face. He immediately understood that he needed a reasonable explanation. If he couldn't give Li Jian a reasonable explanation, then he might not be so dedicated in his work in the future. "Is your son okay?" Zhang Yi asked slowly. Li Jian frowned. The physical injuries has healed, but the mental injuries may never heal in his lifetime. If a man loses the essence of being a man, he will never be able to raise his head ever again. When Zhang Yi heard this, the muscles on his face suddenly twitched, and his expression became a little unnatural. He said, "It is a great blessing that your son has been purified until now, but he shouldn't do that kind of thing with a woman in front of the leader." Zhang Yixian's voice seemed to be affected by Li Jian's words, and it became a little thin. This made Li Jian feel a little strange. But soon Zhang Yixian's voice became low again. "Our snow worship sect is a large sect, with more than 10,000 followers at its peak. If it is not properly managed, unrest will easily occur. And the relationship between men and women can easily become the source of trouble. Adults are still capable of self-control, but the most worrying factor is the young and energetic people who act willfully. In the end times, all laws of order became an empty talk. Also, if they fight and kill each other for love or get pregnant unexpectedly, don't you think it will be a huge burden for the group?" He then finished off in a deep voice. "All this is for the development of the sect. You are a smart person and should understand this. Moreover, your son's matter is not intentionally directed at you, but it's the same for everyone else." After listening to this, Li Jian was silent for a long time before nodding. The high priest is right. Zhang Yi looked at Li Jian, who bowed his head and listened to the instructions, and frowned slightly. "Also, don't let this matter affect your work." Li Jian nodded again and replied that he understood. Zhang Yi comforted Li Jian, and left when he saw that his mood was somewhat normal. He knew that Li Jian could not let go of his son's matter so quickly. However, as long as Li Jian and his family were still living in the sect, they had to choose to let it go. As for Li Jian, he couldn't listen to a word of Zhang Yixian's nonsense explanation. What a stupid logic. For the stability of the sect, people have to be castrated. Then, what's the point of the sect's existence? In the future, if humans can't reproduce, then won't they perish anyway? Li Jian cursed Zhang Yixian's absurdity in a low voice. When he heard his wife crying and Li Kao's continuous painful shouting, he could do nothing. The scene shifts to the investigation team. After they successfully killed a corpse king, they also established a battle plan. That is to attract the entire Tianhai City's zombie group to one place, and then eliminate all the corpse king among them. And even if they could not eradicate all of them in one fell swoop, they can at least replicate their results in their earlier battle, and kill a large number of intelligent white-haired monkeys. Bian Junwu believes that the action mode of the zombie group is similar to that of the Zerg. The Corpse King has the ability to create new zombies, and its infection rate is much higher than that of ordinary zombies. It also has wisdom and can continuously evolve through fighting. However, as a brain, it does not have a strong combat power. So this implied that a zombie tide was needed. The first step was to use a large number of people in front to attract the main tide of zombies. Then send a part of the elite to sneak underground and decapitate the Corpse King. This is Bian Junwu's current plan. It was clear and simple, and at this moment he was currently in the process of implementing it. And that meant he had to choose a suitable location as bait. Bian Junwu held a communicator in his hand, which marked the locations of the 5 major forces in the city and the active activity directions of the zombie group. He tapped the territory of the Snow Worship Sect. Let's set the battle location here. He had 2 reasons for choosing such a location. The first was that the Snow Worship Sect had the largest number of followers, so it was the easiest location to attract the countless zombies. The second was that the location of the sect was in the middle of Tianfeng District, which used to be the most prosperous and heavily populated area in Tianhai City. So naturally, that place would have the most deaths, which in turn would have the largest number of zombies. The place where the underground corpse tied in Tianhai City was most likely to gather was also there. Yan Junwu immediately gave the order for his team to send a message to the 5 forces. The content of the message was very simple. It was to immediately gather all the combat forces to the St. John's Cathedral of the Snow Worship Sect. After receiving the order from the investigation team, the 5 forces behaved differently. Xiao Honglian was currently the biggest beneficiary of the involvement of the investigation team. She certainly knew that the investigation team must have done something, and it was very likely that it was the elimination of the Corpse King in her territory. So she replied without hesitation. Received. We will go there immediately. When Xing Tian and Wei Dinghai received the message, they were a little taken aback. And although they didn't understand the meaning of gathering at St. John's Cathedral, whether out of trust in the strength of the investigation team, or considering their background level, they had to obey the order. On the other hand, the people of the Snow Worship Sect would obviously not be happy about this matter. After Zhang Yi received the message, he hurried to find Yuan Kongye to report the news. The investigation team asked everyone to gather at this location. It seems that they are going to fight a big battle with the zombie tide here. This is not good news for us. If this becomes the main battlefield, then I don't know how many of our followers will die. Many people will die again, and their gathering here is also a threat to us. Yuan Kongye replied after a considerable thought. Indeed, the relationship between the 5 major forces was not harmonious, especially Radiant Prosperity Base and Morning Dew Base, who were backstabbed by them. They could secretly do something that was not conducive to the sect in the end. This made Zhang Yi ask Yuan Kongye if it was better for them to move from their current location, and they needed to be quick about it. This will obviously end terribly if the investigation team and the other forces find out. Yuan Kongye was silent for a long time, and then slowly nodded. Just do as you were told. But we don't need to worry too much. The gods above will bless the believers of the Snow Worship Sect. She then clasped her hands together and began to pray devoutly. Meanwhile, Zhang Yi, after receiving the news, began to think about the profound meaning behind the message. Let us gather at the Snow Worship Sect. Why not choose another place instead of that shabby place? Zhang Yi looked at the message on his mobile phone. Then, he said after a considerable thought, wait a minute, let us bring all our fighting forces. Are we going to fight a big battle with the zombies? If they are so confident about starting a war, have they found any important information? Zhang Yi then got up from his sofa and began to pace back and forth in the lounging hall. At this time, Yang Xinxin drove a wheelchair past nearby, and upon seeing Zhang Yi with a thoughtful look on his face, she couldn't help but curiously ask, "Brother, what are you worried about again?" It was at this moment that Zhang Yi noticed Yang Xinxin's presence. He then waved at her to come over. "Xinxin, you came at the right time. Come over." After Yang Xinxin came over, Zhang Yi showed her the message sent by the investigation team. Yang Xinxin lowered her eyes, and after a brief thought, she spoke in a relaxed manner. "Brother, this is good news." Zhang Yi was a bit skeptical. "Tell me in detail. How is it good news?" Yang Xinxin stared up at Zhang Yi and said, "What does the Snow Worship Sect have? Well, they are quite poor, and they have no other resources except for their large number of people." So what you're getting at is their large number of people, right? Yang Xinxin immediately nodded. Yes, their biggest feature is that they have a lot of followers. At this point, she proudly teased, this is also their only advantage. Zhang Yi couldn't help but think of the Snow Worship Sect. Their weapons and equipment are backward, and the fighting power of their followers is not strong. So when fighting with other forces, they all take the form of self-detonation to cancel their lives with others. But this barbaric and brutal fighting style also won them a living space in Tianhai City. Yang Xinxin continued, if the zombies really choose to devour people, then the large number of the Snow Worship Sect will undoubtedly attract the most zombies. The investigation team asked all the forces in the city to gather there, and also bring all their fighting power. The purpose is pretty obvious at this point. They are going to have a big battle with the zombies there. The people of the Snow Worship Sect and the people who will gather there from various forces will undoubtedly become the most conspicuous targets in Tianhai City, and they will destroy all the zombies there.